Welcome back to Jerez for continued coverage of round 6 of the 2018 FIM CEV Repsol, and we return to the track for the Moto3 Junior World Championship, where we saw all sorts of chaos on the final turn that dictated the eventual podium finishing positions in race number 1 earlier on here today. It's our afternoon race for the Moto3 riders who are back out onto track, and there might be a few scores to settle and some revenge to be had here. Raul Fernandez is your championship leader by a 37-point margin over Manuel Pagliacci, who lost out in that last bend fight in race number 1. So instead of making up ground on Fernandez, he lost an extra 9 points, which he is running out of time to make up. This one of 4 remaining races in this 2018 campaign. All of the top 5 in the championship, finishing in the top 5 positions in race number 1. But it was that final turn that provided the real drama. We're going to see some of the best moments from race number 1. Sergio Garcia, the number 11, making a flying start, but he didn't have it all his own way and ends up scoreless from race number 1, looking for his 3rd victory of the season. He was the rider who caused the carnage on the final turn. Plenty of action in the top positions as the field began to splinter eventually. One of the early pace setters, Yuki Kuni, and also a good job from Somkiat Chantra, but Chantra got up to mischief as the race went on. Ended up scoring just 4 points after an off-track excursion. Up front, any signs that the top 2 were going to break away were undone as they fell back into the clutches of the chasing group. As you can see, the number 32, Ayagura, hitting the front. And then that pack of 3 behind, closing back in. Notably, within that group, Raul Fernandez and Manuel Pagliacci, the top 2 in the championship, who did seem to keep their powder dry early on, not really hustling one another too much. But then they took their opportunity to hit the front and ran 1-2 at one stage. Pagliacci ahead of Raul Fernandez. Successions of overtaking. Absolutely incredible action. Both were determined to lead from the front. That presented opportunities for the Asia Talent Team riders, who've had a good weekend this weekend in Jerez for this Moto3 Junior World Championship. But it was all building towards that final turn. Number 32 cut across the front of Garcia. Garcia lunged for the inside, saw his opportunity, and then it was taken away by a low side, straight into the path of the man who had looked set to take the race victory. Opportunity for Yuki Kuni. Takes his first podium of the season and his first victory as well, and will now be looking to make it back-to-back successes, having moved up to 4th in the standings, directly behind Jeremy Alcoba 3rd, Manuel Pagliacci 2nd, and Raul Fernandez, your current championship leader. Great action in race number 1, Fran. Let's hope for more of the same.
Definitely, maybe with a little less carnage at the final corner, but what we want is drama rather than carnage. I feel like there was a few riders who really got caught up in that didn't deserve it in the first race, but obviously then Ayagura was one of them, and he did completely gain from the same thing last season. So, you know, overall it kind of, you know, evens out a little bit, but it must really suck when you get to the end of the race having done all of that legwork, and then someone else just gets a little bit too cheeky on the inside and you're on the floor.
I suppose from the perspective of a neutral, the most unfortunate thing about that whole situation was that Manuel Pagliacci, one of the championship contenders, was caught up in it. And that means that Fernandez now has an even more significant advantage in the points overall than he did coming into Jerez. And it's Raul Fernandez who will once again be the man to beat here.
Yeah, definitely. Pagliacci, obviously, in terms of the standings, especially coming off much, much worse, really, really bad luck for him. And now that deficit really is quite sizable. It's 37 points after that. So he did take that finish, but obviously he was higher up than before the incident. So, yeah, it's definitely a bit of bad luck for him. But also, you know, you got to take that as part of the game. You know, those things can happen every weekend, not just at the tail end of a championship fight. So it's up to you to manage those as well and be in the right position at the right time.
Reminder, we go back to the grid from race number 1, so the qualifying order is restored here, and we just saw Ayagura there, who failed to score from race number 1. He was within that lead pack, and he will be one of the riders most keen to pick up major points in race 2. Pagliacci says, I'm going again. Let's see what we can get this time around. Also on the front row of the grid. So in terms of the championship contenders, Raul Fernandez did well to get through from 8th first time around. He's got to do it again here. 5 positions back from Pagliacci, who starts 3rd.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, Fernandez really did a great job in the first race, like you said, to make up for that slightly more difficult qualifying. But he's got to do that again. And as we just saw in Moto2, not mentioning any names, when you are a front runner with what you'd expect to be better pace and you are a little bit further down that mid-pack, anything can happen and it's a bit of a bigger risk. But here's one man who will be supremely confident going into this now, right on the back of that first win, and pretty uniquely in this championship, racing again just a couple of hours later. So it'll be interesting to see what Cooney does now.
That graphic at the side of the screen showing his results so far this season really encapsulates in one graphic what you were saying earlier on. Brilliant start to the season, mid-season problems and injuries, only 12 points scored from 3 races, bounced back very much in race number 1 with that victory. Yeah,
definitely, and you can see he was really, really chuffed after that win, as you would be. But I think it's also going to be pretty psychologically important for someone like Cooney to now really get that confirmation, like, I belong here, I belong fighting at the front. And it'll be interesting to see now how he can kick on from that. And Carlos Tatai, another one who will be wanting to do a bit more bouncing back this afternoon, I think.
2 points scored so far this season, but there was an opportunity to pick up some major points in race number 1. And starting once again from 5th position on the grid, he'll be optimistic of converting that this time around as we complete the 2nd row of the grid. Cooney, Tatai and Aleix Viu, who was a race winner earlier on this season at Le Mans and was, well, the somewhat fortunate beneficiary of the incident up ahead of him to claim a podium place in race number 1.
Yeah, definitely. But, you know, View's had plenty of bad luck throughout his CEV campaigns. So he knows, you know, like I said before, you've got to be in it to win it. It's an absolutely, completely cliched phrase, but it's also a cliched phrase for a good reason, which is that it's so often true. So for those guys, you know, and for Chantra as well, here we see 7th on the grid. He crashed out pretty early on in the first race this morning, so he'll be looking to take a step forward this afternoon, I think, and really show that pace at the front rather than having to make a comeback.
Might sound strange, but I think he had an excellent race. Scored 4 points, but to come back from the back after a fall early on, and when he was with the front group, he was one of the early movers, made a great start, if I remember correctly, from the 3rd row of the grid and started fighting his way through immediately towards the front of that pack. So Chantra could very much be one to watch, 8th in the championship standings coming into this race with only 10 points scored in the last 4 races. He could do with a bit of a resurgence here, as could Raul Fernandez, who has dropped just 5 points from 2 races now. Winner of race 2 in Aragon, 2nd place in race 1 here in Jerez, and things are going absolutely his way, even the fortune falling on his side.
Yeah, definitely, and you can see just that kiss on the head, obviously feeling pretty positive ahead of this 2nd race of the day. Obviously now, even if he fails to score and Pagliacci wins, he will still leave with a fairly comfortable advantage, so he'll be feeling pretty good. And as you can see actually now, although we still have the brollies out, it's a little bit cloudier overhead in a few parts of the track, so maybe not going to be quite as scorching everywhere as we'd expected. But Jeremy Alcoba here will be wanting again to make some good progress through the field. He's now 3rd in the standings still, but now 48 points back, which is a pretty sizable margin. But he is one of those who, like Chantra, will be on track in the Grand Prix paddock next time out, because he'll be replacing Aaron Canet, so that'll be a big challenge, and he'll want to get some momentum here to go into that.
Jeremy Alcoba completes the 3rd row of the grid. Reminder of that 3rd row: Somkiat, Chantra, Raul Fernandez and Jeremy Alcoba. And at row 4, Canon Chu, Bruno Iaracci and Denis Onchu. Both of the brothers were there or thereabouts in race number 1. There is Can Onchu, who starts from P10 on the grid, the higher performing of the 2 brothers at the moment in the championship standings. He sits up in 9th after a podium finish in Aragon and a 10-point score from race 1 here in Jerez. Denis Onchu finishing directly behind him, scores 9 points for that, and that sits 15th overall. So at the moment, it's Can who's in the better position in the championship overall.
Yeah, definitely. He's just seems to have had the bit of the edge on his brother in this championship and in the Red Bull Rookies. But obviously in the Asia Talent Cup last season, it was Denis who took the spoils there. So yeah, a bit of a kind of seesaw momentum between the 2 at times. But Canon Chu on a bit of a roll now, having taken that Rookies crown. And he'll want to really finish off now the Junior Moto3 World Championship on a bit of a roll, I think. And race 1 was a good springboard for that.
Bruno Pagliacci starting from 11th position, and compared to his championship standing, he's a little bit out of position on the grid, but he's picked up 10 points now from the last 2 races, so a significant upturn in fortunes of late for him, and he was in the mix and involved in a battle in race number 1 as well.
Yeah, definitely. As you can see, they're classic Spanish track food, the baguette sandwich there. And here you can see Nicolas Ayo, former Moto3 rider, and son of Red Bull KTM Ayo boss Aki Ayo. Just wishing the best of luck to Dennis Onchi there, who seems pretty happy. He looked pretty happy as well earlier in the paddock on a scooter. Quite often these two would stack up with one of the other members of the Ayo Academy on the scooters. 3 of them on it. It looks pretty precarious, but yeah, so hopefully these guys can really start to push forward now. They both, like you said, both had solid results in race 1, and they've shown some good pace here at Jerez, a track they obviously know well. So race 2 could be interesting. And Chan On-Chu had a bit of a run-off early on last time out, so if he can avoid that, might even be able to get a little bit further up.
Making our way through the grid then, Apiwat Wantananon. You could see actually from his leathers that he'd been scuffed up somewhat in race number 1, and a non-scoring race, a second consecutive scoreless race for him. He will be desperate to get back in amongst the top 15 at the end of this race, having been a former podium finisher this season. Yeah,
definitely. He's had some really good pace at times, and then others just a little bit inconsistent. But he's another one. He'll be on track at Buriram Home Grand Prix next time out, so that'll be a big challenge for him. And definitely after that disappointment in the first race today, he'll want to bounce back this afternoon and show what he can do.
Spoke there about Wantananon, who starts in 13th, continuing to look at row 5 on the grid. Filip Salak of the Czech Republic starts on at P14. Really inconsistent results. You can see it there on your screen, as far back as outside of the points, 18th, 22nd, 16th. But he has had point-scoring races as well, and he is inside the point-scoring positions from the start, at very least, there in P14.
Some more fans there on, I think that's on top of the pit building. It's a little bit hard to tell when you just get these isolated shots. But yeah, definitely they've got their favourite there. And now we're going to hopefully have a look at the starting grid.
Here's the grid in full then. Race 9 of 12 in this Moto3 Junior World Championship. Sergio Garcia starts from top spot. Ayagura, the man on a mission after his efforts in race number 1. Manuel Pagliacci with an opportunity to gain ground on Raul Fernandez, who starts 8th. The current championship leader, Jeremy Alcoba and Somkiat Chantra, alongside him, rounding out the top 9. Spoken about Dennis and Chan On-Chu and their rivalry. They line up together on row 4 with Bruno Pagliacci separating them. Apiwat Wantananon, who'll be looking for his first point score in some time since race number 2 in Barcelona.
Yeah, and we saw Tom Booth Amos there on the grid as well. He took a couple of points earlier on today. Great for the Brit to be on the scoreboard. He's had a really tough year with injury, and after that front-running pace in the first race of the season, he'll be really happy to now get some points on the board.
Big field once again, big pack heading into the first turn, and let's hope we don't have too many dramas. We've seen them make it through the first lap all right. It tends to be in the latter stages of the races that they start to really push and start to have the incidents, if they are going to have any.
Yeah, definitely. So, we've had fairly drama-free first parts of the first lap here today, which has been very impressive. But, like you say, we've had a fair share of drama after that point. So it'd be interesting to see how this pans out for these guys, especially Pagliacci now. He's got to do something about that deficit if he's going to make any real impression on him.
So Pagliacci then is the one who starts higher on the grid, up ahead of Raul Fernandez, who has the work to do from further back, but didn't show too much signs of struggling with that in the first race in this category. So we'll see how he gets on in race number 2. Pagliacci just making his way down, looking over his shoulder, or making sure that they don't get in one another's way as they make their way round to the grid, because there's such a large number of them.
I think the official term for a group this large of Moto3 riders is a swarm.
Swarm.
Pretty much how it is. And yeah, it's an impressive sight watching them all make their way around to the grid, and then obviously when they all set off as well. It tends to space out quite a lot for these guys once the lights have gone out, but certainly on this warm-up lap you really get a sense of how many there are on track.
I'm going to go for a murmuration. They're all flying together out there.
I like that. I like that very much.
Coming round to the grid then for race 2 here in Jerez of this Moto3 Junior World Championship. Raul Fernandez is the man to beat. 37-point gap to Manuel Pagliacci in the championship overall, and the others just desperate to try and make back some of that lost ground. Sergio Garcia, the pole sitter, with something to prove here. Twice a winner already in 2018. Failed to score in race number 1, of course, after last turn drama. Here's where it happens. And it's around that final turn that they'll all want to safely negotiate this time around. We saw a pack of 9 or 10 riders break early on last time around. So any rider who's further back in the field, they'll want to get themselves up into those leading positions quickly to join that breakaway train, because I suspect that the same thing will happen here in race number 2 as we settle on to the grid then for the second race of the day for these Moto3 Junior World Championship riders, the 4th race of 5 in our programme here in Jerez. Sergio Garcia, your pole sitter on the number 11 machine. It's been a challenging weekend for the junior team Estrella Galicia. Sergio Garcia on board that machine is your pole sitter. Alongside him, Ayagura. Manuel Pagliacci, second in the championship, has ground to make up, starts 3rd on the grid. Watch for Raul Fernandez in the middle of the 3rd row, coming up from 8th. As we get underway, flying start from Tate, who's going to come straight through from the 2nd row and up into 3rd position in the drag race down to the 1st turn. It's Garcia who takes the whole shot. Good start once again from Agura, and another good start from Somkiat Chantra, who is making his way through the field as well. So an entertaining start to the race and a strong one from Tate. Pagliacci, though, now comes around the outside of him for 4th position. Yeah, Pagliacci looking pretty racy there, aware he needs to make this one count. And again, like you said, great start for most of the junior talent team riders in that front group. Making it count, really, and capitalising on that great qualifying. Be interesting to see where Marc Garcia ends up shaking out as well, having started well back down the order. But for the moment, our focus is on the lead group. Garcia leading it side by side between the Asia riders, and also Manuel Pagliacci trying to come around the outside now for 3rd position. They go 3 abreast into our favourite passing place, turn number 6. Pagliacci backs out of it that time around, and we're safely through at the end of our back straight and round turn number 6. Yeah, definitely. As you can see, as it was in race 1 in the early stages, Garcia just really making that initial break, but not too much for the guys behind to worry about so far. And you can see this time around the Red Bull KTM Ayo guys, the Untitled twins, they've made much better starts, bit less scrappy than the first time around. And Pagliacci really looking like he wants to hustle past these JTT guys ahead of him now. And it was certainly the Asian team riders who did the good job from the starts first time around. And they're up in strong positions once again here, the Asia Talent team riders. 2nd and 4th positions for the moment, with Pagliacci between them. The number 33 Yuki Kuni, race 1 winner, sits in 4th place. As you said, Onchu with a good start, up in 5th position. Dennis higher than his brother for the moment at least, as they come back onto the start-finish straight once again, with Garcia leading. Not much in it between our lead runners here. Garcia just moving across to make sure he's got that covered into turn number 1. He clearly wants to lead this race from the front. Yeah, definitely. And someone off on the green stuff there. Yes, a little bit cheeky. But Pagliacci now will be fairly happy, I imagine, with his start. He's well in touching distance of the lead, and Raul Fernandez, crucially, hasn't made up really any ground off that start line so far. So that's important for Pagliacci. Obviously, like we said, that points deficit now is getting a serious problem, and he really needs to eat into it quite seriously in the second race. Top 5 have made a split from the rest of the group, splintering away. Carlos Tate is one of the, well, he is the leader of the secondary group. Having run wide earlier on, I think he killed his own momentum, but he's still in an absolute pack here of 5 or 6 riders as they make their way down 4 abreast in that secondary group into turn number 6. Tate holds on and holds position in 6th place. Raul Fernandez is in that secondary group, so he'll be desperate to break clear of it, because Pagliacci at the moment is 1.5 seconds up the road from him. Direct championship rivals are 3rd or 2nd now, I think. Yeah, 2nd and 7th position. Yeah, definitely is quite a sizable bit of daylight we can see now in between those 2 groups. And like you said, it's about a second between Onchu at the back of that front group and Tate at the head of the second group. And Fernandez is bogged down in that second group, so it'd be important for him to try and break clear of that and maybe try and bridge that gap. And he's oscillating within that group as well. That's the Tom Booth Amos, who I don't know whether he's come down, because I saw Marshall's moving gravel, and he does indeed. So we were talking about his efforts to score in race number 1, and down he goes in race number 2. Disappointment for him. Yeah, definitely. That's a tough end to the second race, but he does now have some points on the board, like I say, after a really tough year with injury. That'll be pretty important for him to have done that in race 1 at least today. Manuel Pagliacci leads us then as we complete lap number 2 ahead of Sergio Garcia by just a tenth of a second. Ayagura in 3rd position. Dennis Onchu's having an absolute stormer of a race here up in P4 and ahead of race 1 winner Yuki Kuni, who's still with them, just saying, well, if everything pans out how it did in race number 1, he might just be one of the best placed to try and take victory. Raul Fernandez has made it to the front of the secondary group, and he and Tate are now trying to break away. Well, Tate makes a dive bomb down the inside to try and take that 6th position. He doesn't quite get it. Fernandez holding on then, for the moment at least, in P6. It's Pagliacci out in front. New fastest lap of the race last time around, as you'd expect on lap number 2. And we've got another drama further down the order. And our Malaysian rider, I think, had problems in race number 1 as well, has actually just been passed there by the other rider who'd fallen, which was Tom Booth Amos.
Yeah, difficult day there for that Sepang-backed rider there. One of the Malaysians who are really here to learn the ropes this year. Not much expectation, just progress wanted from those guys, giving them some experience and some track time. But yeah, obviously, bad luck in race 1, ended also in a fall, and then in race 2 the same, and with a little bit less distance run, so a bit less experience here on Sunday for those guys. So if you want to get back in it if you can, and just enjoy those 14 laps of getting to grips with the bike and the track.
Dennis Onchu hasn't had a lot of major point-scoring positions this season. Well down the order in terms of the championship overall, but he's holding a good 3rd position here. He is slipping back slightly from the top 2, though, as the riders directly behind him go side by side for 4th position. Onchu trying to block the pair of them out. Pagliacci trying to make the break with Garcia in tow. Dennis Onchu is defending against Ayagura and Yuki Kuni as they head back down into turn number 1. And we've lost Aleix Vieux, the number 81, who was inside the top 10 at the time he went down. So that's on the final turn, and he's going to be another of the riders having to make it back through. We're going to see a replay here.
Yeah, just sliding into shot there on the right. Not exactly sure what caused that, whether it's just rider error or if someone else gave him a little bit of a cheeky nudge there. But yeah, View out of the running after that podium finish. Ooh, bit of a tough incident there. But up and okay, immediately to his feet. That's the important thing. But yeah, this battle now for the final podium position at the moment. As you can see, Pagliacci's taken over at the front. But yeah, the 2 Asia Talent Team riders and Dennis Onchu, all from the Asia Talent Cup. So some serious beef here for supremacy to complete that podium. I have to see how that plays out.
Garcia thinking about a move down the inside into turn number 6, but backs out of it and holds 2nd position. So it's still Pagliacci who leads. Garcia in 2nd, Ayagura in 3rd place ahead of Dennis Onchu now. And Yuki Kuni in 5th position. That group now 1.5 seconds clear of 6th position down. So Raul Fernandez has got it all on if he wants to try and beat Pagliacci. And Pagliacci might be able to make up some of that lost ground, both from race number 1 and the previous rounds of this 2018 season. Remember that Pagliacci was, unfortunately for him, a non-finisher in Aragon, and that's what's left him with so much work to do here. But he's looking set to make up for that disappointment. Twice a winner already in 2018, of course, winner of our opening round in Estoril and winner of race 2 in Barcelona. And he leads here with just over 12 laps to go. Pagliacci out in front, Garcia in 2nd, still the same 5 in that lead group.
Yeah, obviously there's quite a few bikes in between Pagliacci and Fernandez at the moment, so that's the best the Italian can really hope for. If he can win the race, just get as much traffic, so to speak, in between him and Fernandez as possible, other than obviously a DNF or a 0 for his key competitor in the championship.
No changes there into turn number 1. They're following one another through for the moment at least. Can Tatai and Fernandez start to bridge that gap? It's still 1.3 seconds between 5th and 6th positions, as just half a second covers the top 5. So we've got some real competition up front, but no change in that separate battle further down the order, as Onchu makes a move down the inside, but doesn't quite pull off. So we've now got the 2 Japanese riders in 3rd and 4th positions behind Manuel Pagliacci, our race leader, and Sergio Garcia, who might look for a move here into turn number 6. Down the inside he goes, ducking out of the slipstream. We've got Agura thinking about it as well. Garcia makes the move, and through he comes to lead. Will Pagliacci get the cutback? No, he won't. A perfect pass there from Sergio Garcia.
Yeah, nicely done that. You can see the Italian just looking for that open door on the inside there, but it didn't come. And he's forced to take that 2nd place and just slot in behind Sergio Garcia. Obviously, the man more than slightly responsible for his misfortunes earlier on today. But yeah, and now you see the Asia Talent Team riders just 3rd and 4th there, with Dennis Onchu having been shuffled back, trying to make that pass and not quite making it work. Cooney got past him, so this should be interesting now, but it's an impressive performance from Onchu. Obviously rookie in this championship this season, to have been running at the front this long so far is really good pace from him.
Onchu looks like he's struggling to stay with that top 4. They just broke ever so slightly back, and once you start braking, it becomes increasingly difficult. If they hold one another up a little bit around this final turn, he might be able to tag back into the slipstream and close in, which I think is exactly what's now going to happen. The top 3 are all going nose to tail into turn number 1. Ayagura might be best placed actually with the slipstream from 3rd position. He's down the inside. Pagliacci comes through to pass Garcia. Those two have swapped and changed positions several times already up at the front of the field. Garcia now moves across the front of Pagliacci to claim the position. It's that type of movement that they've got to be careful of, because that's when they start getting together.
Yeah, you can already see as well that gap slightly coming down a little bit. But I think as well with the slipstream, Dennis Onchu is one of the smallest riders in this field. And Garcia is a pretty small guy as well. And that genuinely can make a bit of a difference on the straight. Obviously, they can tuck in a lot better and they're lighter. You know, obviously, Danny Pedrosa a few years ago was always the fastest in a straight line because he's such a small guy. And it really can make a difference. And you can see there, Carlos Tatai having a good look behind him. I always remember, I think there's a David Coulthard anecdote where his dad always used to tell him never look behind you because that says too much to your competitors. But a bit of a different discipline, but maybe good advice there because he seems to have lost out a little bit spending that time having a look. And Fernandez doing the classic pat on the back, follow me, I've got the pace, we'll hunt them down.
And at the moment, that's working well for Fernandez. 0.8 of a second now is the gap between 5th and 6th. And he's also bringing with him Kan Onchu, who was involved in a couple of passing manoeuvres on that previous lap. So Kan Onchu trying to steal back the headlines. He passed Yamanaka and then Ayarachi to come through for 11th place. It's Sergio Garcia who leads ahead of Pagliacci in 2nd. Still Agura, Cooney and Onchu, all more or less together. But it's Raul Fernandez who's starting to bridge the gap now. 0.4 of a second to Dennis Onchu. And it won't be long before he's thinking about a move for 5th position.
Yeah, definitely. They're really on the scene now, aren't they? That second group, they've really made that work with Fernandez heading that train and having the pace to catch them up.
And they all just came past us all together in one motion, and we could feel it because things are starting to build up now in race number 2 in this category. And Garcia cuts to the inside. He just wants to break that slipstream and then claim the racing line he wants. So Garcia keen to lead from the front here ahead of Pagliacci in 2nd. 3rd position still with Agura, Cooney and Onchu. No movement in those positions for the last couple of laps. The key to the last couple of laps, though, has been Fernandez closing just 0.1 of a second now between him and Dennis Onchu as our 2 groups merge together, at least in the case of Fernandez.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be pretty interesting to see if the likes of Tatai and Salak at the head of that group just behind Fernandez now have the pace to stay with him, because Fernandez obviously one of those guys you'd expect to maybe be able to hunt down the front group and get involved in that and have the pace to kind of leave those other guys behind a little bit. But so far so good. They're pretty much in that fight still, so it'd be interesting to see how that develops.
Brilliant effort from Fernandez, that, because we haven't seen a lot of riders being able to bridge from one group to another so far here today. It's tended to be once the field splinters, once you're over 1.5 seconds behind, you're not getting the slipstream from the rider in front of you. You struggle on the 2 main straights, but Fernandez has worked really hard and he's brought Tatai and Salak with him. Credit to the Czech Republic rider as well, because he's having a really good race, having started down on the 5th row of the grid in 14th. He's up now in P8, so a good effort from him so far on the tail of Tatai and Fernandez, and hoping to go with them as Fernandez pulls that group forward. 1.5 seconds separating the top 8.
Yeah, definitely. Salak obviously as well with a bit of Grand Prix experience now. He'll probably feel a bit more comfortable in the head of this kind of fight in the Junior World Championship. Oh, we can see some moves there.
Agura cutting down the inside of Sergio Garcia on the final turn and coming through for 2nd position. Garcia might have a go back into turn number 1. Pagliacci will be happy about that because it's enabled to break him to break a few tenths of a second down into turn number 1, but it doesn't look like that gap's going anyway. That's Montanan on again. So after a drama in race number 1, he'd already scuffed his leathers once, he'd cleaned them up, and now he's going to have to do it again because down he goes into the gravel, shaking his head. Another frustrating weekend for him.
Yeah, definitely. That's really tough luck for him. He'll be pretty disappointed with the day's work, I think. But, you know, reset now. Time to get on track at his home track in Buriram and see what he can do there. But yeah, Pagliacci, you could see last time around, absolutely nailed that final corner, able to arrive to turn 1 with a little bit of clear air behind him, breathing space, not too much under attack. And these guys now are starting to squabble a bit, and they'll have to be careful because Pagliacci's the kind of rider who will be able to capitalise on that.
And Dennis Onchu seems to be struggling ever so slightly to stay with that lead 4. He's more or less with them at the moment, but that gap between 4th and 5th is oscillating more than any of the other gaps on the track. Pagliacci has managed to hold that 0.3 of a second that he led by at the end of the last lap, and still halfway through, or more than halfway through this 8th lap of the race, Pagliacci has 0.3 of a second in hand over Sergio Garcia in second. Ayagura looking for a way through. Yuki Kuni on his tail, trying to stay with him. The two Japanese riders, can they work together in the latter stages of this race? Onchu in 5th position, Fernandez in 6th, is just a second behind the leader now, with a bit of daylight starting to emerge behind him. The top 6 going together.
Yeah, definitely. Like you were saying, it does look like maybe, especially Pagliacci is on rails at the moment. It looks like it's not really too much of an effort for him to keep this pace and keeping the lead nice and steady, everything in control. These 3 behind are squabbling over second, maybe a little bit scrappier, but certainly, yeah, Dennis Onchu, you just see a couple of little squiggles here and there compared to Fernandez behind him. Obviously, a lot more experience in this category. You can see that a little bit. Maybe it's costing the Turk a little bit more to try and stay in this group.
Ogura having come through down the inside into turn number 13, takes second position away from Sergio Garcia, who's now 3rd, with Yuki Kuni in 4th position. As you said, Dennis Onchu starting to drop back a little bit. Fernandez will want to clear him now, as running very, very wide behind Filip Salak, and I think he might have lost out to Carlos Tatai as a result of that. The Czech running very, very deep, and Tatai getting it squared back nicely does indeed get in front. So Tatai coming through for 7th position, Salak relegated to 8th, as we see the continued fight towards the front of the field, 2nd, 3rd and 4th positions. And Onchu has now been passed by Fernandez, might have a go back at him. They're side by side coming down into turn number 6, and also side by side for 2nd position. In fact, 3 abreast for 2nd position, passing 2 in 1 manoeuvre. Yuki Kuni comes through from 4th to 2nd, Garcia relegated down to 3rd position, but not by the man he thought he was defending against. Ayagura still behind him, and all sorts of action going on from 2nd to 4th. But as you said, this is enabling Pagliacci to break clear just as he wants.
Yeah, definitely. Now you can see Pagliacci just getting a little bit of clear out. You can see all the gravel there on the side of the track. Obviously, luckily, they're pretty much in a straight line there, but definitely something to watch out for those guys going through that part of the track. But Pagliacci now making a serious break for it.
And the two of them in 2nd and 3rd touch down the straight. It almost looked as though Garcia was saying, excuse me, leave me to my own devices, moving him out of the way. He sits in 3rd position because the pair of them ended up getting past while they were squabbling with one another. It's Yuki Kuni who came through. Garcia's now going to try and come back at him down the inside. Kuni, of course, has fond memories of that final turn because it gave him a race victory as he runs very, very deep coming off the final turn. In his tow now is Ayagura coming through for 3rd position. Garcia's left a little bit out of the tow down the start-finish straight and gets pushed back to 4th place. Onchu is not too far behind. Fernandez being reeled in slightly by Tatai and Salak. So we've got 3 seconds separating the top 8, but this is gradually spreading out now as this race goes on.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, some fun memories for Kuni that final corner. Not so much for Ogura. And with the same man there in slightly getting in his way. But I think it'd be interesting to see what Garcia will do at that final corner next time around, obviously with a bit of a bad experience last time. But these two Age of Talent team riders at the moment definitely really have the pace to fight the Estrella Galicia junior team rider. And it's a good scrap, but like you said, they are really allowing Pagliacci to consolidate that gap. So it could well be the best situation possible for the Italian in the lead if he can keep that and not have any dramas and just take that 25 points, and these guys can get in the way of Fernandez.
Sergio Garcia through into 3rd position ahead of Yuki Kuni, who drops from 2nd to 4th. I'm convinced these Japanese riders are working together with one another in a straight line, because it seems not too much of a coincidence that it's consistently the same two riders who are tucking in one behind the other as they try and defend 2nd and 3rd positions. Garcia is between them this time as they head onto the back straight and down towards turn number 6. It's Manuel Pagliacci. The gap not quite a second. He'll be so keen to get it more than a second, because once he does, he'll start to avoid giving the slipstream advantage to the group directly behind him. Pagliacci out in front looking good. Ayagura in 2nd position, although that might not be much longer. Garcia thinks about a move around the outside of him. Agura moves across to claim the ground. Where have we seen that before? But this time it doesn't end in tears. He holds on to 2nd position.
Yeah, definitely. These three really now are in a fight, aren't they? They're taking most of the opportunities they're offered. Don't seem to be considering the pace too much and that gap to the front But like we said, it's just Pagliacci not quite able to break above a second at the moment. It's now down to about 0.8 again. He had got it out to just under a second last time around. But yeah, it's pretty interesting actually how he is at the front but not able to really streak away despite this battle going on for second between these guys.
New personal best sectors in 2 of the 4 sectors last time around for Agura and Garcia, most notably the last sector that enabled them to stay within a second of Manuel Pagliacci, who is still your race leader. And so far, this race is going absolutely as Pagliacci might have hoped. He did a great job from 3rd position on the grid to get to the front, built 0.3 of a second and then held it since then. Sergio Garcia, I think, off the track altogether. We've seen that a couple of times on the straight. They're trying to crowd one another out of the slipstream, and it works well for Agura, who holds on to second place, Garcia 3rd, and Cooney still 4th. As we see the riders making their way through, 5th position is with Denison Chu, and Raul Fernandez is just dropping back ever so slightly from Denison Chu at the moment. Those two starting to settle down in 5th and 6th positions, and I think Pagliacci will be pleased to be at the front. But if he knew where the other riders were in respect of him, he'd be even more pleased. Fernandez down in 6th place, his main championship rival and the current series leader.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously we're seeing Denison Chu seems to be finding it a little bit harder to stay with these guys. And I think that's true, but he's doing a really creditable job at the moment and really hasn't let himself get dropped at all. So we're still well in there and ahead of the current championship leader. That's a good day's work in anyone's books. So definitely good job from the young Turk at the moment. And Fernandez, I have to see how he deals with that later on.
3 riders still within 1 second of one another at the top of the field, but it's becoming increasingly difficult for Agura and Garcia to stay with Manuel Pagliacci, who gets encouragement for his team. Agura in the 3rd sector, faster than anyone and closing in, but he's got to be wary because Sergio Garcia has been a little bit unpredictable this weekend so far and is right on his tail. We're back to the same 2 that caused the chaos last time around, dicing it out this time over P2.
Yeah, definitely. I think both of them will be a little cautious of the other. But yeah, I was just thinking a few moments ago, I would like to see Pagliacci's pit board and whether it mentions anything about Fernandez, and then that's exactly what we got on screen. And you can see it saying laps 5 and then just the gap and his position. So nothing about Fernandez on there, which maybe you wouldn't expect. Just a little bit curious to see if they were letting him know that actually he does have a sizable advantage on his key competitor at the moment.
Agura trying to crowd out Sergio Garcia once again, going all the way to the line on the right-hand side of the straight and then back up to the curb on the left. So some real defensive riding being put in by Agura, but it's exactly that that's enabled Manuel Pagliacci to break away. Still 0.7 of a second up. Not quite as dramatic his advantage as it was a couple of laps ago when I thought he was going to break the 1 second barrier. He's got more than a second to Raul Fernandez. In fact, he's got almost 2 seconds. Fernandez has got his hands full with Denison Chu for 5th position. I think he'd be pleased just if he could claim that 5th place and then hope for any drama up ahead of him, because he'd be the leader of the secondary group, which is starting to form. 0.7 of a second now between Cooney and Onchu, 4th to 5th.
Yeah, definitely. Like we were saying, I've got a bit of a heartbreak there for Jari Montella from the Siege 58 Squadra Corse team. Let's have to see what's happened to the Italian there on the outside. Does he get tagged?
What a group that is, though. It looks almost like a first lap the way those are all together. And he does indeed.
A little bit, yeah, just a cheeky poke there on the outside, but it is a bit of a risk when you take that outside line. You know, those guys on the inside sometimes, not even because they're being overly aggressive, just if they've not judged it quite right and they head a little bit wider than they expected. When you go around the outside, you really leave yourself open to that kind of incident. But bad luck for the Italian there. For
the record, Philip Salak, one of our riders of the race, has been given a track limits warning by race direction, so he's got to be careful not to continue using the green apron on the outside of the curbs, the runoff area, to be used only in case of need. And I think he's obviously been abusing that. Sits in 8th position at the moment, fractionally behind Carlos Tatai. Their fight's still ongoing, but I think they've dropped over 2 seconds back now from Raul Fernandez, and that's a separate fight for 7th as we see side-by-side action for 2nd position. This time Garcia got up alongside Agura earlier in the straight, but Agura still manages to hold on and defend that P2.
Yeah, really solid work there from the Japanese rider just to defend that and keep 2nd. And like you're saying, track limits warning for Salak. Got to be careful of that, because like you say, in moments of need is when you can head onto that green stuff, which is essentially when you've made an error and you use it to make sure you don't have a crash, you don't hit anyone else, and you gather it back up and you carry on. Not ever to gain an advantage. If you're doing that and using it as an extra bit of the track, that's when they'll seriously start penalising people.
those two, Tatai and Salak, having a royal fight for 7th and 8th positions, and we're about to see Fernandez, I think, have a go down the inside. Does he get there? Not quite sure. He was certainly looking for a move on Dennis Onchu there to try and break for 5th position, and we'll wait to see when they come back into shot. No, Onchu has managed to hold on, only just ahead of Fernandez. 5th and 6th position. Fernandez dives down the inside. Meanwhile, Pagliani's run wide at the final turn and drops from 1st to 3rd. He'll have the momentum, though, because he had the cutback. Drag race in with 3 laps remaining. Pagliani trying to recover as they go into turn number 1. It's Garcia on the move, but it's Ayagura who's hit the front, and Onchu is trying to recover on Raul Fernandez for 5th. 2 separate fights going on here at the front and for 5th position.
Yeah, just trying to say, oh, it looks like Onchu's just behind Fernandez still, but you can see that speed of the little Turkish rider on the straight, really able to get up alongside again with Fernandez. But yeah, Pagliani there, he will be kicking himself for that. He had everything exactly as he wanted it, completely in control, no risk, head of the race, 25 points in the bag, and that mistake is very costly for him.
0.7 of a second lost in that final sector alone for Manuel Pagliani, and suddenly the championship complexion has turned around because Fernandez has made a pass to come through for 5th, and Pagliani's ended up dropping 1st to 3rd. He now recovers the lead, though, in brilliant fashion. Manuel Pagliani, where did he get that from? Sergio Garcia has been struggling to make that move on Ayagura all race long. Every time he does it, Agura blocks him out. This time, passing the pair of them is Manuel Pagliani to hit the front again.
Yeah, that was an impressive move. That's the way you got to recover when you've made a mistake like that. Decisively straight back up there and, yeah, taking back the lead. So it'll be interesting to see now what happens with that lead. Obviously, like we said, he had about 7/10 in his pocket before. So see if he can regain that and keep it steady this time. And then classic low side, just asking too much at the front there. And sadly, a DNF there for Kevin Orgis, was it? Yeah, so, you know, at least he's got some good track time for the young German who's trying to make his mark and get some progress in this championship.
Pagliani is back at the front, but he's going to have to work harder for it now as he again goes in deep on that final turn. He's obviously desperate to give himself the best possible run onto the start-finish straight, so he's going in deep, but he's going to leave himself vulnerable. And if you do that on a final lap, someone's going to throw it down the inside, and when you've got Garcia directly behind you, you know who it's going to be. Pagliani leads into turn number 1, ahead of Garcia in 2nd position. Ayagura 3rd, Yuki Kuni has sort of got back on their tail now. We've got a 4-rider group. Onchu past Fernandez at the end of that last lap, so he's back up into P5, and suddenly it's gone back to where it was for Pagliani, who leads with his main championship rival 6th.
Yeah, absolutely, kind of a reset, like you say, back to how it was a couple of laps ago, but these guys definitely a lot closer to Pagliani, and Garcia especially looking very threatening there. But Pagliani, yeah, that final corner, that was a very open door, and it did look fairly intentional. Maybe it was a little bit wider than he intended. But, you know, it's all very well looking for drive on the start-finish straight, but that opening that door is a dangerous game to be playing. And now we can see Garcia really looking to make a move, and it looks like we're going to have both of them going past here.
Oh, Pagliani gets stood up coming into turn number 6. He tries to turn, and he's got a rider directly on the inside of him. Now he's looking over his shoulder. Knows he needs to stay within that group. It's a group of 4 as they make their way through. Pagliani looking on the tail of the number 32, Ayagura, who sits in 2nd position. Sergio Garcia still your race leader. He'd be delighted with this after the disappointment of race number 1, but it's him and Agura, the 2 rivals, shall we say, from race number 1, who are going at it up front once again. Pagliani seems to have dropped off the pace slightly on this lap so far. He'll be keen to get back onto the tail of Ayagura to look for an overtaking opportunity. Just over a lap to go now, and we're starting to build up to the climax, and let's hope it's slightly less dramatic than it was last time around.
Yeah, definitely. Who knows, maybe with Agura and Garcia today we've seen the start of another classic Rossi-Stoner style rivalry that'll go on for generations. But definitely those two, if it's the final corner again for both of them, it's going to be pretty interesting to see how they deal with it.
Ayagura leads, having made that pass on Sergio Garcia around the final turn. Garcia's going to repay the compliment down the inside into turn 1. He can't quite get there, and neither, incidentally, can Raul Fernandez on Dennis Onchu further back. And Dennis Onchu is working almost like a teammate for Pagliani at the moment, doing a great job of holding back the current championship leader, who's stuck in 6th position and has been for the majority of this race. It's Ayagura out in front, Sergio Garcia 2nd. Manuel Pagliani has led much of this race, and he's primed for a potential overtaking opportunity if one presents itself. Garcia's going to look for a way through. Ayagura blocks him out. And will Garcia go for that last bend lunge down the inside once again?
Yeah, it's heating up pretty much now, isn't it? We've got a similar gaggle of guys to we had first time round in race 1, and Pagliani, again, he must be kicking himself for that mistake when he had that lead and he had such a safe gap behind him to be able to take that final corner. He's gone wide there a little bit. That door's way too open for a final lap. And Garcia and Agura straight through to take advantage of that.
Agura swept across the front of him. Pagliacci dived down the inside. Then he left too much space on the inside, and Agura came back through. It's Agura who leads once again, ahead of Sergio Garcia in second, Manuel Pagliacci in third. Yuki Kuni has got the best view of anyone, sitting in fourth position as he has for the majority of the second half of this race. Pagliacci feints a move. That was probably unnecessary, probably cost him time. Agura still leads it, and Pagliacci could find himself watching on here to a final turn squabble between Garcia and Agura over the race lead. Will we see more fireworks as we did in race number 1? It's still Agura ahead of Garcia. Agura gets it slightly wrong coming off there. Garcia swarming all over him, ducks down to the inside. Here we go again. Garcia's got the move made this time. Pagliacci stuck on the outside line, goes all the way around the outside of Yuki Kuni to hold on for third position, and it's a draft race to the line. Garcia is just about going to hold on, but not much in it over the line, and a separate fight further down the order. Which way are they going to finish? To tie just ahead of Salak, I think, for 7th position. We'll see if the timing agrees with me in a couple of moments' time when it settles down, because there was next to nothing between the two of those, and Agura slams his hand down in frustration, having been beaten by 0.03 of a second in the drag race down to the line by Sergio Garcia. And Agura did exactly what he did in the first race, swept across the front of Garcia, coming in to turn 13 for the final time. And Garcia made the same move he did last time in race number 1, but this time he made it stick, so he's learned from his mistake, which of course is one of the key aims for the riders in the FIM CEV Repsol. And Garcia makes the move stick. He doesn't go down in the path of his rival, and the two who were fighting it out for the lead in race number 1 end up finishing in the top 2 positions in race number 2. The top 3 separated by just 1/10 of a second. Manuel Pagliacci earlier in the race with an error on turn number 13, giving the route to Sergio Garcia and Agura back into the race. He had an 0.8 of a second lead at one stage during that race. Pagliacci pinned 7/10 all in one sector and ended up dropping from first to third. From there he struggled to recover. He did recover at one stage, but ends up down in third position. Nonetheless, Raul Fernandez 2 positions behind Pagliacci. I think for Fernandez that will probably be a good result in the end. He couldn't stay with the top 4. He was held back for the majority of the race by Denizon Chu, and he gets it, I think, by 0.06 of a second, at least according to the timing screen at the moment. He gets 5th position ahead of Denizon Chu, and Carlos Tatai gets the verdict on Salak in the end for 7th position. Those were the 2 fights outside of the top 4, but a great battle involving those lead 4 runners, Garcia, Agura, Pagliacci and Kuni, in that order in the end. So Sergio Garcia becoming the first rider in this Moto3 Junior World Championship to take 3 victories this season. He's also had 4 non-scoring races though, and that has clearly severely hampered his charge. There is Manuel Pagliacci on the number 96, second in the standings coming into this race, of course, and third in the race is a decent result when you consider that Raul Fernandez was a couple of positions behind him. He only makes up 5 points, Pagliacci, and there was a whole lot more than that lost in race number 1. 9 points, in fact, lost in race 1 by Pagliacci compared to Fernandez, who's coming round on a lap of honour, having finished in 5th position. 3 seconds back from the winner in the end, but as I said, 0.06 of a second ahead of Denizon Chu on the line. Those two were fighting one another throughout the closing stages. At one point, I thought Fernandez was going to be able to join that lead group of 4, because he'd bridged a gap of 1.5 seconds to get onto the tail of Denizon Chu and bring a secondary group with him. That secondary group fell away to tie Salak and eventually Yamanaka, who finishes in 9th ahead of Canon Chu, who rounds out the top 10. Here is confirmation of that result. As I said, 3 groups in 1 really within that top 10. The top 4 finishing with just over 0.2 of a second separating them. Raul Fernandez and Denizon Chu in a pair, Tatai and Salak in a pair, and then Yamanaka, who's best of the rest, in P9. Honda lockout in the top 4 places. Successful race for Sergio Garcia and also for Agura. He was frustrated as he came over the line, but when he walks away from this race, I think he'll be satisfied in the end. A 3rd podium of 2018 for Agura. Manuel Pagliacci, meanwhile, who has failed to score in just 1 race this season, did have that 3-point score in race 1 in Valencia, but he's only had 1 failure to score this season. more consistent of Raul Fernandez's rivals, but Fernandez hasn't yet dropped out of the points in any race in 2018. If he maintains that consistency to the end of the year, he surely remains the favourite for the title, despite finishing in just 5th position in race number 2. And to be honest, that's a reflection of where his pace has been this weekend.
Pues estamos
because
aquí
he was
con
8th on the
Sergio
grid.
Garcia después de una
Your
increíble
race winner
victoria en la segunda
is
carrera aquí en Jerez.
Sergio
¿Qué nos
Garcia.
puedes decir después de la carrera?
Bueno, ha sido una carrera súper complicada, muy dura por las altas temperaturas, pero he sabido mantenerme, he hecho una buena carrera y al final he podido meterle la moto ahora y he conseguido la victoria. Esta victoria es para Andreas, mi amigo Andreas.
Important victory that he dedicates to Andreas. Of course, Andreas, who sadly passed away in Barcelona earlier this season. So a dedication there from Sergio Garcia, your race winner, race number 2 here in Jerez. Garcia making the break from the line and into the first turn. And that's where the action really started, in the fight between the top 2, and a pack fight in the end that turned into a quartet of runners at the front of the field. Entertaining racing in the second of our races in the Moto3 Junior World Championship here in Jerez. Two brilliant performances put in by our Moto3 riders here in Jerez. Plenty of entertainment in both of their races here today. Sergio Garcia, the winner, second time out, ahead of Ayagura, who takes the 20 championship points. Some consolation for him after a non-score, of course, in race 1 when he was taken out by Garcia, and the same pair finished first and second at the second time of asking. Garcia's victory moves him on to 96 points, and that's a highly creditable effort for him, and clearly an emotional moment for him as well, as we heard in the interview, as he takes his first victory since Barcelona, his 3rd win of the season. It's been almost win or bust for Sergio Garcia this season. He's got to find consistency in the coming years of his career. But he keeps himself in with a shot of the championship podium at the end of 2018 with a 3rd win of the season. He's had 3 wins and only 2 other finishes, 4 non-scores in 2018, Sergio Garcia. But it's all smiles now as Sergio Garcia wins for the 3rd time in 2018. Ahead of Ayagura in 2nd position. Manuel Pagliacci takes 3rd place, so it's been a successful scoring weekend for him in the end, as he picks up 16 points and moves on to 123 points overall. But Raul Fernandez finishing with 11 points, of course, behind Yuki Kuni, who picks up 13, moves on to 155. The Spanish national anthem for Sergio Garcia.
aplauso para Sergio Garcia, vencedor en esta segunda carrera.
Spanish national anthem then for Sergio Garcia. Third time he's heard that for himself this season. Third time he's been up on the podium, third time he's won. Great result for Sergio Garcia in the context of his championship. Not such good fortune, meanwhile, for Jeremy Alcoba, his teammate. And that does spice things up in the battle for third position. It is looking increasingly like we may well have two fights in the championship now. One for first and second, and a multi-way duel for third. As I said, 32 points separating the top two now in the championship standings. 4 more than when we came into this race weekend in Jerez. So a highly satisfactory effort for Raul Fernandez. There is confirmation of that 32-point gap. Yuki Kuni 57 back now from the leader. So with only 75 points up for grabs, things getting tougher and tougher for the riders. Third position's down. As I said, looks as though we've splintered into two separate groups. Kuni, Garcia and Alcoba now separated by 2 points after Alcoba fails to score in race 2. Gives up all that ground to Sergio Garcia, who picks up the 25 points and moves level with him. Separate group from Aleix Vieux down, with Ayagura in there in the mix with him. Of course, we saw problems for Aleix Vieux during that race, and he fails to score after picking up a podium in race number 1. So the riders who are struggling to find consistency are the ones who are dropping back. But Sergio Garcia, just by virtue of his 3 wins, is still up there and challenging for a top 3 place overall. Fernandez versus Pagliacci as we head into the final 2 rounds of this 2018 FIM CEV Repsol. That's going to be a duel to savour, but on the evidence of this weekend, it's Fernandez who still has a margin in hand. And in fact, it's Fernandez who here in Jerez manages to extend that leading margin. Completion of our penultimate race of the day here at the FIM CEV Repsol, round number 6 here in Jerez. Still Albacete and Valencia to visit before we conclude 2018. But with each passing race, we're getting closer and closer to deciphering a situation in the championship standings. Fran has hot-footed it back up from an interview with Sergio Garcia, and obviously an emotional moment for him as he takes his first victory since Barcelona. A race where we saw a similar pattern actually to the first one, but in the end they managed to all keep it clean. A great last bend pass from Sergio Garcia.
Yeah, definitely. It was very similar to the first race, except that everything got pulled off correctly this time. So, yeah, obviously Garcia learnt from the mistake in the first race of the day and made that stick in the second. Agüero didn't look very happy down in Parc Fermé, but obviously, you know, it's good for him as well to get a second from second on the grid. That's a job pretty much well done, I'd say. So disappointing, obviously, not to win. I imagine it's still a little bit difficult after that situation this morning to really be like, oh, well done, straight after when there's been that much drama. But no, obviously, they're really great sportsmen, but it can be a bit difficult to swallow when you're just 0.030 off a win in such a close race.
And his best result of the season. You know, 3rd podium of the campaign, best result of the season. So he mustn't be too down because he's had 2 strong races, 2 strong performances, and up on the podium.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be the feeling as you get a little bit more distance between, you know, the race and his feelings. But I think straight afterwards, obviously, it's going to be all the negatives that you feel. And then after a while, you have a little bit more space and you can really consider, okay, actually, this was a really, really positive day for me. And, yeah, he's moved up as well. So good job.
And how about in the context of the championship battle, Fernandez versus Pagliacci? It's got to be a day where Fernandez says job well done as well, surely.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, didn't finish in front of Pagliacci in that second race, but nevertheless, Pagliacci didn't win it, and overall, Fernandez has increased that advantage by a little bit. So definitely job well done for the Spaniard, and yeah, no dramas for him. Sensible weekend of racing here in Jerez for Fernandez, and I think he'll take a lot of heart from that going forward. An
extra 4 points gained at this stage of the season when you're already 28 points clear and there's only a few races left in play is a great result, of course, for Raul Fernandez, and he's just got to keep it clean and stay on the track. He's the only rider who's managed to finish every race in the points so far this season. More consistency for him, but it didn't look like he had the same outright pace as Pagliacci and indeed the 2 Japanese riders up with him and Garcia.
Yeah, definitely. I think today he was lacking that extra little bit of pace to allow him to fight for that win, but obviously as well, you know, he's had that consistency throughout the season, and he knows that it is better for him to take that solid points finish and let the others take that risk as and when they have to try and catch him. So, you know, like we were saying, job well done for him. An extra 4 points overall, and that's definitely a big positive because, like we said, came into it with just over a race win clear. Now he can afford to have a DNF and even come second to Pagliacci at the end of the year if necessary and still take that championship.
So 4 races completed out of 5 here at the Ángel Nieto circuit in Jerez. And we look forward to our final race of the day coming up next.